Pitching your creator-owned comics, Writers Unite. To the far left here is the wonderful Cullen Bunn, the creator of the Six Gun. Give it up for him. And then to his right is Charles Soule, the creator of the newly announced
Letter 44.
Letter
announced
44
last night
at
from
Oni Press. Also 27.
Strange Attractors.
Strange Attractors. They're all busy people. Actually, let me go through a little bit about this. Who the heck are we? I'm going to do reintroductions. How about that? Pretty organized. Cullen Bunn here. He's done quite a bit of creator-owned work. The Six Gun, The Tooth, The Damned. He's been working for Marvel for the last 2 years. Some of the titles you may know of him from: Fearless Defenders, Deadpool, Captain America, Spider-Man. He's a busy, busy lad, and he rocks. Charles Soule, 27 Strange Attractors strongman, and he's the new writer of Swamp Thing over at DC. And this weird guy, myself, Jim Zub. So I'm the creator of Skullkickers and Makeshift Miracle. I've done work on Street Fighter Legends, a bunch of different video game comics, including Klonoa and Sky Kid, stuff like that, and the Pathfinder comic book, the adaptation of the Paizo role-playing game. So what we want to do is we want to talk about sort of our the things we've learned as creators, working in the industry as writers, the things we've learned over the last few years that we wish we knew heading into it. Hopefully, some of the stuff is common sense, but will be helpful to hear, and some of it hopefully will be new things that you didn't know before about writing or breaking into the industry or sort of the pitching process. Then at the end there, we're going to have some time for your questions, and we'll try and answer them as extensively as we can in the time we've got, so that you're able to take your own ideas and move forward with them. As you guys have noticed, I mean, creator-owned comics are on a real surge lately. Companies like Image Comics and Oni Press and Archaea and Boom and all these different publishers are moving into a creator-owned space where they realize the benefits of having comics where the creators have an ownership stake and they're putting more of themselves into their stories. And it's a fantastic time. There's all sorts of opportunities for you to be able to tell your stories and for us to get out our ideas, whether that's online or in print. And so we want to talk about kind of the writing process, talk about the pitching process, and then hopefully zero in on some things that, some questions that you have. First and foremost, and it's the cliche, but it's always sort of the first thing out of the gate. Cullen, tell us a little about how you got into comics, or how you broke in, if you will.
I'm glad you used, I'm glad we talk about breaking in, because I said this, I talk a lot about how I broke into comics, and I've had some people say, I don't like the term breaking in because it makes it sound like you're doing something you're not. But for me, it was very much like breaking in, because it was a very difficult process for me. It took me a long time because I didn't know how to approach editors. I didn't know how to put proposals together. And for a long time, I almost gave up on doing comics at all because I just did not know what I was supposed to do. I ended up getting very lucky. I worked at a comic book shop with an aspiring artist, and we started talking about doing some projects together. And it's much easier for a writer to take a project to a publisher when you have an artist attached to it. They can actually see it and visualize what they're going to be looking at. So I established a friendship with the artist. It was Brian Hurt, and we did a book together called The Damned that we pitched to Oni, and it was the second thing we pitched to Oni.
What year is this?
2005, I guess.
Okay.
So 2005. I mean, I've known Brian for a lot longer than that. We were going to work on projects together, and it just took a while for it to come together. And then we pitched The Damned. Was the second thing we pitched to Oni, and they accepted it. And after that, I thought, hey, my first book's out. I've got it made. I am now a professional comic book writer, and I will never have to worry about getting work anymore. And I learned the harsh lesson that the only thing more important than getting your first book out there is to keep working and get your second book out there. So I worked on that, and I continued to pitch stuff to Oni and other publishers. And just doing The Damned opened the door to Oni, and that opened the door for me doing the book The Tooth, and doing The Six Gun, which is the ongoing series I work on. And I've got another series starting up next week called Helheim with Oni, and another ongoing that has not yet been announced. So it was that first project, and I admit it very, very readily. I got lucky that I established a friendship with an artist early on.
So, but just to give people a solid understanding of that, you've only moved into full-time writing. When did you actually leave your day job?
It's coming up on my second year as a full-time writer.
Okay.
I had a full-time, job as a vice president of marketing, more than full-time job, and that really ate into my time as a aspiring comic writer, and I kept I found what I found was I was using that as an excuse. So I'm so busy, I'm so tired when I get home, but it was not until, but I always was still, at the same time, I was always wanting to be a full-time writer. That's what I wanted to do. I was miserable working that job. It was not until I made a decision that I was going to, I got up at 5 every morning and I worked until 8. I went to work. I wrote during my lunch break. I came home around 5, and when my son went to bed at 8, I wrote another 3 or 4 hours a night. It was not until I made that decision to just sacrifice, watching TV, playing video games, doing anything else. And it was tough for about a year, but as soon as I made the decision to do that, it was like a light switch. Things just started happening. I got people who were, putting attention, they were looking at my books, they were talking to me, they were reaching out. And I do I do the books for Marvel, and it was through my creator-owned books is what opened the door to Marvel, which allowed me to make enough money to write full-time.
So look at that in terms of that span. So you're talking about a good 4 years where you're doing this stuff while you're juggling the day job, 3 to 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially. And so I think that's something that a lot of people may not realize. I get a lot of people talk to me about writing, and they'll say, oh, I want to be a full-time writer. And I say, oh, so do I. And they just go, what? Oh, but you've been doing this for years. Yes, I have. And there's a transitional period, and it's a difficult thing for people to understand because they assume that it's like an on and off thing, that you go, once you start writing, okay, the money comes and you're good and now you're a writer. But like any kind of creative career, there's a transitional period, and it can be longer or shorter, and it may never
depends
change.
on how quickly you want to be a poor writer,
Right,
professional
right.
writer. Then you can do it right away.
This is starving artist kind of stuff. So Charles, tell us about it's still ongoing process.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Like you never stop breaking in. You never stop pitching. Once you get your first kind of large project, as Cullen mentioned, it's about staying in. You break in, then you stay in, and hopefully you stay in forever. So my basic story of getting into writing was I was in grad school for kind of a professional career, and I had previously been a musician, pretty seriously, and I realized that when I got out of grad school, I wouldn't really be able to be a musician in the same way. Like I couldn't bail on work to go play shows and things like that. So I decided that I would get in, start writing and see what I could do as a professional writer, hypothetically, someday. And so I started writing novels, and I wrote 2 novels, had an agent, had things were going okay until.
So what year is that?
This is like 2000, between 2000 and 2003. Okay, so I wrote a huge first novel that was taken out to editors and so on, and then the editors basically the way that process works is your agent takes it to the editors, and then they all have about 6 weeks to review the manuscript. At the end of that period, they say, yes, we're gonna give you a huge advance, and your life is gonna change forever, or they say, nah, we're moving on. They said, we're moving on. So at that point, I had a second novel that was about halfway through, and my agent was like, all right, well, don't worry about the first one. It's a great book. It's not your fault. It's just the market. That's what he said. And he's like, finish the second book, and then we'll see what happens. So I finished the second book, went through a couple of drafts on it with his advice, and it was ready to go. It was ready to go out. It was really strong stuff. It was a contemporary thriller set in New York City about a guy who gets, I think it was 113 visions of the future, very specific things like a squirrel running out of a yard at such and such time. Then he starts selling them, and it's cool. And it's called The Oracle Year, in case anybody wants to check it out later. And so I sent it to my agent saying, it's ready to go, this is locked down. And he said, guess what? I'm sure it's awesome. I have no doubt you'll do very well in this business, but I'm quitting the business myself to teach disabled kids in the Bronx. And so I was very happy for him pursuing his dream and doing something so fulfilling, but I was like, all right, where does this leave me? This is right now we're in 2004, 2005, so this is like 5 years of steady focused work on becoming a novelist that literally had nothing to show for it, because when agents are very personal generally. It's not like you just go to somebody else in the business. You have to be what they want. So I was stuck without an agent, and the idea of going back to sort of cold calling and sort of pitching agents sounded miserable. So I'd always loved comics. I'd kind of been doing like little short scripts and stuff here and there, and I started to get into that more seriously. And got some very nice feedback from other people who were trying to do the same thing. I don't know if you know Brian Knucklebendis, right? He has a message board, and there was a bunch of people on that message board who were trying to make an anthology book using short stories. So I contributed to that. I sort of pulled things together. Over time, I decided I wanted to do something longer form, and that was sort of became my first big project, which was Strongman for SLG. It's kind of a wrestling action story. And that was picked up in 2007, came out in 2009. SLG is a fantastic company, but they're not a huge company, so it opened a door, but I had to then step through it and kind of leverage that as much as I could to get my next series, which was 27 for Image, and that did quite well for an indie book, which was great. And then that I was able to turn into Strange Attractors at Archaea, Letter 44, which was just announced at ONI last night. And then Swamp Thing for DC, which just sort of happened this fall, and the first issue hits in April. So it's been a sort of kind of long sort of plateau with just really, really hard focused work and not a lot happening. And then all of a sudden in the last probably year or 18 months, it's been a real, like, very quick upward trajectory. And I think that happens a lot because it takes a long time to get good at this, and it takes a long time to establish the connections that allow you to make more things happen. And writing's really hard. You're not good at it right away. So,
So there's the craft end of it, and then there's the networking end of it.
Absolutely.
So for myself, my background's in animation and art, so I was actually an artist first, working in the animation industry up in the frozen northern climes of Canada on cartoons you've never seen down here that weren't very good. And so I worked in animation for quite a while, and animation's wonderful in a lot of ways, but you're also kind of a cog in the machine. So you're a widget, and they have a certain number of widgets they need to make the art, and if you're not going to do it, they'll just widget someone else. So I really wanted to have a greater stake in kind of the creative process, and always loved comic books. Didn't really think of that as a viable career. I was going to go back to school for 3D animation. A lot of my friends were getting into the video game industry. And then a friend of mine, Omar, was working at the Udon studio, the art studio and comic book publisher, and he was like, "Oh man, you got to come visit." So I just came with my stuff. I was getting ready to go back to school in September. This would have been February 2003. I go visit him, and he's like, "Oh, your stuff's looking cool. Show my boss. Oh yeah, your art's good. If we needed anyone, we'd give you a call, but we don't need anyone." I was like, "Oh, okay, no problem. I'm just gonna chill the summer and start back at school." And like a week later, they called up and they go, "We need someone. Do you want to come work for the summer?" So I've been doing work on and off now for the Udon studio ever since. So it's the longest summer job I've ever had. It worked out really well. I was able to make a ton of contacts. I learned a lot about publishing and about art. And before I'd gone into art, I took a year of film, which included a pretty heavy focus on script writing, and I was really, really intent on that. And I realized how much I was missing telling stories. I had done, just for my own self, I did an online webcomic, like a graphic novel online from 2001 to 2003. When I was working at the animation studio, I was really burning out, and I wanted to do my own thing. So in the evenings, I would do this little story. So I did 180 pages over about a year and a half, 2 years, just in my spare time. And I learned a lot about storytelling and craft. I didn't even know that I wasn't concentrated on, I'm going to turn this into my career. It was just like, oh, I've always wanted to do this kind of thing. And then being at the Udon studio, opportunities started to open up. A lot of people talk about networking, or they talk about, they just hire their friends. And you hear a lot of this kind of grousing in the industry. And the reality is that you want, a lot of times you're working in an industry where you meet a lot of qualified people, and you want to work with people that you like. I don't think that that's unreasonable by any stretch. So if someone is qualified and you like them, why wouldn't you pick them over a stranger who is also qualified, right? So if you're in a company and you're working and you're qualified and doing something, so the guys at the studio knew that I could write and that I had done script writing, and when I started to sort of make, like, oh, I would love to, at any point I would love to write, or if there's a chance for me to do a short story or a sample or something like that, and there was no real opportunity for that until our regular writer on the Street Fighter comic series at Udon, he found out that his wife was pregnant. He impregnate his wife. They found out that they were going to have a baby, and then they found out they were going to have triplets, at which point his entire schedule changed. And so he had to turn down a miniseries that they were going to be doing. But we had promised the artist that he was going to be drawing that series, my friend Omar, hilariously enough. And so they were like, we need another writer. And I said, I know someone who could do that thing. And they said, well, you're going to have to pitch this to the producer of Street Fighter, and, you know, good luck. And so I put together the best pitch I could, and I sent it in, and they said, okay. So that was my sort of hit the ground running. But it is right place, right time, but you also need to be able to deliver on that ability of the right place, right time. So then I was able to leverage that into doing some more small writing work at Udon. Around the same time, one of the artists at the studio was approached about doing a short story for the Pop Gun anthology, which is Image's sort of new talent anthology. I did 2 stories for Pop Gun.
Does that still exist, by the way? Does Pop Gun?
They haven't done one in a few years. I think they won the Eisner, and they were like, we retire. We're awesome now. So the editor of Pop Gun, Joe Keating, who's now a writer at Marvel and doing the Glory series for Image, he really liked the short story that I put together, so he introduced me to the other Image guys. Eric Larson was the publisher at the time, and I had this little story idea that grew out of the Pop Gun story, and it was called Skullkickers. So I pitch it to Eric Larson. Eric Larson loves it, says, you're good to go. We're going to launch it in 2008. And then my artist bailed. So I had an approved book ready to go, and then it got put on the skids, and I was like, oh, that's done. That'll never happen. I'm all finished. And almost 3 years later, 2.5 years later, I met Edwin. He applied to a job at Udon. He was just a kid who was finishing up his run at...
He's still just a kid.
He is a kid. He's just a little thing. The Academy, New York Academy of Art and Design or something like that. And he applied to the Udon studio. They didn't have any work for him, but I thought his samples looked amazing. We started just a personal conversation back and forth. And the only problem I had with his samples was he wasn't leaving enough room for dialogue on his pages. I'm like, dude, your pages are so dense. You know, what script are you working from? He's like, oh, I don't work from a script. I don't know, like, I've never worked from a comic script. I'm like, oh my God, well, you should. And he goes, well, do you have one? I said, well, I can't give you any of the Street Fighter stuff. That's not owned by me. The only finished script I have that's mine is this little kooky book I put together for Image called Skullkickers. He goes, well, I'll draw that. So we did a couple sample pages, and those are in the first issue. The great thing was I sent those sample pages to Eric Stevenson, who is now the publisher at Image, and he emailed me back, and he was like, oh my gosh, this is great. You know, the original artist is back on. We're doing the book. And I said, this isn't the original artist. It's some 20-year-old from New York. And he goes, great, he'll work too. You know, let's do it. So we launched it in September 2010, and our 19th issue, rebranded as the Uncanny Skullkickers, came out on Wednesday, and we've been rocking sort of ever since. That allowed me to leverage to do, I've done other work now for Bandai Namco, the video game company. I've done work for Dynamite. I'm writing Pathfinder. Done some work for DC. And so it's been a really cool process, sort of. I think all of us, you can see that kind of leveraging. You start with one thing, and then you kind of trade that in and move over and shift and prove yourself at every sort of step of the game. All of this kind of stuff builds off of pitching. You know, you need to be able to tell people what your ideas are. I think a lot of people don't realize how important the pitch process is to this whole thing.
Right.
One of the big misconceptions I get when people come to me is they want to hand me a big chunk of material. So they want to prove that they've worked hard, and working hard is a huge part of this. So someone will come over and go, I've got a script. Can you read? And they drop this telephone book. Look at all this work I did. Hire me. And I'm like, actually, it's the inverse. I don't want to see that kind of thing. So let's talk a little bit about that kind of pitching process.
Sure.
Got some bullet points here. When you're pitching something, one of the things I always suggest is, you know, you have to think almost like an editor. You have to think about the other side of the process. Why should a publisher choose your comic over someone else's? Obviously, if you have a name or if you have an established credit and experience, that's a plus. They're able to look and say, oh, you have the ability to deliver, you have the ability to finish, or you have a fan base, or any of those other things. You have to understand, like, the publisher doesn't know you. They don't know who you are, and I'm sure you love your mother and you're a great person, but that isn't necessarily the factor that they're looking for. They need to be able to understand why you are the right person for this project, why this project is special, and why it is worth publishing in the first place. And that's a very ephemeral kind of a concept. You know, the easiest one is experience, obviously. From there, organizing and summing up your ideas into a short and concise pitch. imagine you're an editor. How would you describe your editors, or the amount of work that your editors do? Especially over at like Marvel and DC and stuff like that.
They have no headspace at all for anything. Like it's like you hear about every conversation I have with an editor. I mean, anywhere, whether it's like Oni, Jill or whoever at Oni, or the Image folks or DC. I mean, you can tell there's this fear in their voice that they just have no time at all to think about anything. So if you're going to give them an idea for your project whether you have a relationship with them or not, when they're going to hear about essentially, I think the way they think of a pitch is like, oh my God, more work. I mean, that's probably the first thing that comes in their head. Like this, even if this is great, it's going to be something else I have to do or think about. So you want to make it as easy as possible for them to understand, that there's a reason that maybe doing more work on something is a good idea because it's an amazing project, but make it quick and so quick and crystalline that they can just get it immediately. And then if they like it, then you can give them more material. But that one-liner, that two-liner, it's crucial.
And
you hear a lot about, you have 30 seconds to capture their attention, and I think that's wrong, because if you sit by yourself sometime quietly for 30 seconds and time it and feel how long that feels. I really think you have about 10 seconds to capture.
5 to 10
No
seconds.
pressure.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just a matter of you just have to hone that pitch down to what is going to get your, get that idea
And that
across.
doesn't mean that the story isn't complex. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean but that doesn't, all that information can't work its way into a pitch. A pitch has to be bite-sized and understandable. So in my case, I'll give you an example. So Skullkickers, I've been using the sort of byline as people walk by my booth all weekend. They'll say, oh, what's this? And I go, it's like The Hobbit meets The Hangover. So it's about these two mercenary monster hunters who get themselves in deep shit and they got to fight their way out. If you like things like Army of Darkness or Big Trouble in Little China, you're really going to enjoy this.
Yeah,
Boom. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. There's
So
actually,
why don't we give our
I was just
that's
going
a
to
good
say.
idea, yeah.
So the great thing about that pitch is that in 10, 15 seconds, whether you're going to like that kind of a thing, or you have a sense of something, a relationship with that you can go, I know the headspace that you're in for that kind of story. And if it delivers on that concept, hopefully that would be entertaining and good, and I'm willing to give you a bit more time to stretch that out. I mean, there's more to the story than that. There's actually a lot of subplots and there's a lot of crazy things that we put into the mix, but I don't have time to tell you that. I can't say, and actually there's all this wondrous symbolism.
It's more that they don't have time to listen to it.
Yeah.
You could sit there and talk to them for an hour, but
Yeah,
they don't have time to hear it.
So pitch me.
I was just going to, before I was going to say, I used to work in the job search industry, and there's the misconception that the resume gets you the job, and that's not true. A resume is just there to get you an interview, and it's the same with the pitch. The pitch isn't supposed to tell someone the whole story. It's just to get them to move to that next step to say, I'm interested enough to want to know more.
I mean, if somebody can do that, I mean, that's almost like it's very hard to do the log line well. And I think if somebody can do it well, then the editor would be like, all right, maybe this guy, maybe it's worth listening to him for 5 minutes. If they have a log line that's great, then all right.
The other night, so give
All
us
right.
a pitch on one of your books.
Okay, so the next big thing I have coming out this creator on is a book called Strange Attractors. It's going to hit from Archaea May 1st. The log line I use on that is two mathematicians, one young, one old, use complexity theory, the butterfly effect, to turn New York City into sort of an engine. Then it's about what happens when they turn it on. It's kind of like Good Will Hunting meets Harry Potter for grown-ups in New York City. That's my quick one.
And the next big creator-owned book I have coming out is Helheim, which comes out on Wednesday. Go to your stores and ask for it. And my log line, what I pitched to the editor was very short. I said it's a Viking-era Frankenstein story. And that was my pitch. That's what made them ask me to send in the one-page proposal.
And you'll notice, again, these are all pretty self-contained concepts. One of the other misconceptions I think I get from a lot of people is they feel like they're only going to get one shot to ever tell the greatest story that they've ever wanted to tell, right? So they want to tell some sweeping, ludicrous, Lord of the Rings, epic quality, over-the-top, 400-volume thing. And we all have those stories, and you all want to do the
Isn't
next.
that basically Skullkickers?
You all have these very giant things that you want to do with your stories. But originally it was a mini-series, and then once they said we can go ongoing, then I heaped on the kitchen sink shit. So this is the thing, though, is that when you've got to make it, understand that your first project isn't going to be that thing. It's not going to be that, you can't go to a publisher and go, it's so big I can't even explain it. Like, if you're Neil Gaiman, you can walk in a room and you can go, I'm going to write for you. And they go, hired, you know, like, but if you're not that person, if you don't have that prestige, if you don't have that huge audience, you've got to come at them with something entertaining and understandable and bite-sized that they can get into. You know what I mean?
It's worth saying that I think there are maybe 5 people in the entire comics industry who could do that.
Right.
You know, like it's no one gets a 75 issue maxi series greenlit ever today. It just doesn't
off the
happen.
cuff, yeah.
Like the most, you know, the biggest name people you can think of are like working to get their 6-issue miniseries picked up now. So you have to keep it small.
No, I've heard
keep
that.
It
I've
tight.
heard like even big name writers who will say,
Yep.
yeah, you know, I pitched that by Vertigo and they turned it down. You know, John Layman pitched Chew to 5 different publishers before Image grabbed it. Those publishers kick dirt now, but you know, you'd be surprised in terms of
Brian
that
Wood
process never stops.
is a guy I know decently well in Brooklyn. And he tells me that a lot. That he's, you know, despite where he is, which is like all over the place in the business, he's still, you know, every time it's a new challenge. So keep it focused. You know.
Yeah, and
Yeah, the Six Gun, which is going to be a 50-issue series plus some spin-offs, I pitched that as a 6-issue miniseries.
Yep.
That was the pitch, and I wrote the first 6 issues to end because you know you never know and if it's going to sell well enough to go on. But I left it open enough that we were able to continue it on into an ongoing series.
exact same. So I had a 5-issue for the original Skullkickers, and by issue 3, Eric Stevenson at Image asked me if we would want to keep it going, and I said, how long? He goes, how long do you want to do it? I'm like, and then I planned out a 6-arc, 36-issue plan for it. So moving right along here, you got to remember that this is a job and a possible career, and that sounds like an obvious statement. When you get into creative things, when you get into fun things, art things, storytelling things, I think there's an idea that it is unprofessional, that just because we're wearing T-shirts and jeans and being big dorks, that that this isn't like other
T-shirts and
jobs.
jeans? Come on, man.
Sorry.
I dress for success.
That when some people look good and the rest of us look like bordering on homeless people, that you know, but the idea that professionalism comes across in a lot of ways. How you communicate, the quality of your emails, something as simple as that, or you know, your ability to hand in things on time or be timely in terms of meeting appointments or interacting in a polite and professional way, putting on deodorant, you know, not going to the booth in cosplay when you're pitching your stuff. Like, not that there's anything wrong with the costume, but it's one thing to be saying, I'm a professional writer. It's another thing to be saying, I'm a micronaut. Also, I have a pitch for you. You know, so you like,
I would like to be a micronaut.
yeah, I know, right? But that's what another day is for.
It's your next
So,
professional hurdle, right?
and I
After
think,
he's achieved everything in comics, he's going to be a micronaut.
so this is the kind of the thing that I think a lot of people forget about, or they think that there's a different paradigm for this. It's that it's all inspiration and, you know, luck of the draw and destiny, or the muses kissing your fingertips. And you notice, like when Cullen was talking about methodically working every day and writing over his lunch hour and working in the morning and balancing this stuff out, that's the difference between a professional attitude, even if it's not his full-time job, versus, oh, I just don't feel like it, I'm going to wait until it comes to me, or, you know, that kind of amateurish approach to the work.
If you don't have the habits that will make you need to have the habits that will make you a successful professional writer well before you're a professional writer, because you will have, if you have a chance to get something picked up, you will have there's no ramp up time to hit deadline. You have to be able to do all that stuff already. So the more time you can spend figuring out how to do all that stuff in the beginning, the better off you'll be when things start to happen.
You will suck. Your first thing will suck.
Yep.
Because you don't know any better.
My first thing was awesome.
Unless you're Cullen Bunn, your first thing will suck. So you need to show you can create consistent professional work before people will pay you for it. Sounds completely obvious, right? But in comics, there's this weird thing that happens. The comparison I have is, if you ran into a high-class restaurant and you just ran in the door and you said, I'm going to be your chef. And they were like, okay, who the fuck are you? And please leave. But then they might be like, well, okay, well, have you ever cooked before? No, but I watch the Food Network all the time. I love food, and it's my life. And if you let me be the chef, I'll be the best chef I can ever be. You're like, yeah, but like, could you show us that you've cooked before? No, but I really want it. Like, you got to let me be the, I eat every day. I'm like a really good food person. Please let me do this. And they're going to think you're crazy, right? Because you got to go get training for it, or maybe you start in the kitchen as a dishwasher and you move up to a prep, and then you move up to the sous chef, and you get your experience until someone goes, I trust you, I know you're capable, and I know you can deliver, and we're going to put this responsibility in your hands. And as a chef, that makes complete sense. But when someone comes up at a comic convention, they go, I got a great idea for Wolverine. And then Marvel goes, I'm like, no. You're like, dude, I love Wolverine. This is my life. You have to let me tell you this story. Just let me write it. Don't be a dick.
Look, I'm
like,
dressed as Wolverine.
I'm
Don't you
dressed-
get it?
I have adamantium. No, but it's like, there's this sense of, but it's art. It's a story. I have a story. Why won't you let me make money? You're like, well, because you have to build your craft, and you have to grow, and you have to get better, and you have to build trust, just like in any other job and occupation. And I know that's not sexy.
Yeah,
But-
when I've been asked many times how, what's this, if there's some, how do you get it, how do you become a writer? What do you do? What's the secret? And for a while I tried to think of some real secret to writing and storytelling. But the truth of it is, the best advice I can give somebody is do the work, be on time, don't get bitter, and don't be a jerk. That's that beyond the,
And that's
storytelling's
really hard.
important, but those things are all those things are all very difficult, and that is more important, I think, to breaking in addition to networking is important. But but those things, are the non-sexy side of telling stories, but is what's going to help, I think.
Absolutely, and it's about building your craft and being, self-reflective and also getting critique. So starting small and improving your craft, short stories and simple ideas before moving on to longer and larger work. Finishing things is really important. I hear from a lot of people, they say they've got ideas. Oh, I got great ideas. And I'm like, okay, so what are you doing with it? Oh, well, I'm going to get to it. Oh, well, you get on that. You know what I mean? Like, even if it sucks, finishing it and then having something you can reflect upon and learn from and improve upon is viable, is important. Otherwise, it's just vapor. In your head, it's always the $1 million idea, but on paper, it can be evaluated for better or for worse.
It also should, it's also, I think if you want to be a writer, writing should be incredibly fun to you. It should be something that when you're in that zone doing it, it should be like one of your favorite things that you do, because you're going to have to do a lot of it if you want to do it. And so if you don't like it enough to finish something, you need to maybe think of doing something else with your time.
And I find that with the artists, too. I'll be talking to an artist, and they'll be like, so how many pages should I have in my portfolio? Like 3 or 4 sample pages? I said, no, like 30 or 40. That's a lot. I'm like, what do you think the job is?
Yeah, and
It's
I
like
think
20 pages a month. Can you show that you can do 2 months' work?
I think
Oh.
finishing it is really important, but it's also start it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people want to have written something, but they don't want to write. And I hate the term wannabe. Oh, you're a wannabe writer. I can't stand it. I hate it. I think it's a terrible term, because if you're actually writing, you are not a wannabe. You're a writer. It's when you it's when you sit down and you think about it's when you don't actually do the work. You just say at some point I'm going to start writing something.
It's not easy.
It's
It's not
not,
like it's not like we all sit there and it just pours out. Sometimes you have great days and it goes really well, and other days, it's really, really difficult and you got to push through. And I think that one of the big things I learned about being a professional was on the days that it sucks, I can still put out an acceptable, decent quality thing. On the days that I'm awesome, sure, the muses are tickling my fingertips and I'll pump out, 12 pages of script.
And I know that work gets in the way, family gets in the way. These things.
You need to be able to ignore that stuff. You need to be able to set it aside. Forget
Well,
family.
Well, yeah, forget your family. No,
Lose
but
them all.
But I would
for the
say
words.
try to find a way to write something every day. I don't care if it's a panel, a description of a panel, and a couple of lines of dialogue, something. I just had a friend who he's working on a novel, and sometimes he'll write 20 words a day. He'd email me and say, I wrote 20 words today, or I wrote 25 words. And he has an 80,000 word completed novel now, just a few months later, because he dedicated that. I'm going to put something on the page every day.
Your head, at least what I find, is that if I can put my head in the space of a story I'm working on, even if I don't do very much on it, my brain is doing work sort of unconsciously at the same time, and ideas are spinning out. So I might I find a very productive time of the day is when I'm just falling asleep, because I've kind of let go of the day, and then whatever things I've thought about, sort of in the back of my head during the day, those things start to crystallize then, and then I go to sleep and forget them, and I've lost the great ideas by the time I wake up. But
And as a writer, I take a lot of naps.
But even, yeah, I've got all sorts of those things, whether it's, my day job, I park my car and I've got like a 5-block walk. And that 5-block walk is like silent time. Or even when I'm on my drive in, I used to listen to talk radio and then I would just get angry. So I just turn off talk radio and I have absolute silence and I'm just in the car thinking about the stories that I'm building and the ideas and the stuff. It's like, even if it's the same scenes, I know what they're about, just rolling them around in my mind, a better way of doing it, or I think this is going to fit together like that. And you're surprised how your brain's able to make those connections and contacts, and the new ideas get built on top just sort of naturally.
But I think, as Cullen said too, it's important to actually write or type things down, at least something, because that, then you have something concrete. I mean, I've been using these moleskin notebooks for years and years and years, and I carry a small one, about this size, and then I have this big one for sort of, more formal writing. But, so you have a place to put things down as they occur to you right away. And then you've got that, you can always just flip through it. I mean, I've got Swamp Things in here. There's a Wonder Woman thing.
Steal
there's
that
all kinds
book,
of
you'll
stuff.
have his brain.
So it's very useful. I would make it easy for you. Like, writing's really hard, so if you can make it as easy for yourself for the ideas to come and to remember them later, find shortcuts for yourself.
And then, of course, you want to get it out there. So self-publishing is easier than ever before. It used to be you had to literally get the stuff physically printed, but the biggest reading audience is online. And that's the simple reality of it, is you want to put your work out there, you want to get it out to as wide an audience as possible, and then build on those things. Create work that you're proud of and that represents your interests and passions. I think people make the mistake that they're trying to make like the Frankenstein monster of the perfect story they think will get them hired. The perfect story that will get you hired is the story that you care about and that you would enjoy as a reader, because then an editor is going to get what you are about and want to hire you to tell the kinds of stories that you love. There's no point in trying to be somebody else. There's no point in trying to put on the airs of something that is not you. It's hard enough just to do the work, let alone try and be a clone or put yourself into that space that's not something you care about, especially early on. I think later on you can get more experimental and take more risks. But at the start, my first stories was sort of an amalgamation of things I really liked about books like Sandman and some of the dramatic manga that I really enjoyed when I was in high school. My second book is about playing D&D with my older brother when I was like 8 years old and running around the house pretending to kick skeletons in the face. Like, these are things that meant something to me, and that's the kind of stories that I write because they come from somewhere natural.
I just got it. Skullkickers. I just got it.
Oh, right. And collaborate with artists who strengthen your work. That's easier said than done. Finding a good artist, finding a good partner that you can, have a unified vision with and that they can add to the work. I know it's difficult to find artists, and in many ways you want to sort of go with the first person who'll take you to the ball. You're just like, you'll work with me? Great, let's go. But is it appropriate to the story? Is it a good fit? Maybe this isn't the story that will work best with this artist. Let's develop something new that plays to their strengths in terms of the style. And the quality of that art's going to reflect your work. As if your writing is friggin' beautiful, but the artwork doesn't look professional, you don't look professional. And that's a really, really tough thing, because I know a lot of times you're lucky that you were with a professional quality artist right from the get-go. Who was your friend?
Well, yeah. First of all, you're right. You're better off waiting. If you find an artist that you're kind of on the fence about, you're better off waiting and finding an artist and trying to find an artist who is going to do a better job for you, because you're going to do yourself a disservice. You're going to end up hurting yourself more by putting out something that people won't read because they don't necessarily like the art or it doesn't fit the story.
In the same way, you have to be honest with the quality of your work. You have to be honest with the quality of the art. And that doesn't mean it's easy, but you're going to be trying to find people who are in the same boat as you. They're trying to get their foot in the door. They're trying to, go into a well-established artist and saying, hey, I'm nobody. You want to draw my story?
And
isn't going to work either.
Once you find that great artist, and like I said, I'm lucky because Brian Hurt and I did The Dam together, but we kind of, at this point, we did The Dam together. Now we're doing The Six Gun together, and we're already talking about what is our next project after that, and what is our next project after that.
I want to steal that guy.
No,
you can't keep working with him. That's not fair.
He's mine.
3 in a row is.
He's all mine. No, but once you find that artist and that it becomes a real collaborator, he or she becomes a real collaborator with you. That's something that
and
you can
a friend.
continue. Forget about friendship. Friendship's overrated.
All right, so some stuff we wish we knew before we started. These are just quick points here. The industry is actually more accessible than ever before. I know it feels like there's a barrier there and that we're on one side and you're on the other, or things like that. There's a big brick wall, and they got spikes at the top and barbed wire on top of the spikes with the electricity and the burning oil. But the reality is that conventions like this and online and Twitter, you have more access to creators and to creative outlets than ever before, and you need to make use of those. Not pester, not be obnoxious about it, but to understand that those social contacts build slowly, very slowly in some cases. It doesn't happen overnight, it doesn't happen easily, but good conversation about things you're passionate about lead to opportunities. And it's not so much about being at the right place at the right time, it's about creating enough contact points that more times and places exist so that one of them can spark and turn into that correct time that you can then capitalize on. I'll give you guys a really good example, thing I didn't know. Do you guys know Ethan Nicole does a comic called Axe Cop? You guys have heard of Axe Cop? Overnight success, holy shit. Got run on CNN and USA Today, and he's got a Fawkes cartoon coming out of Axe Cop. Where did this kid come from? Oh my God, millions and millions and millions of page views of this webcomic. Ethan Nicole, the artist for Axe Cop, the co-creator, working with his 5-year-old half-brother Malachi, he did a presentation at a festival I was at last week, and I thought, like everyone else, that he was an overnight sensation, that he had totally luck of the draw, his number came up, and he thought of this brilliant thing, and it struck the zeitgeist. That's true. He did over 500 pages of comics before Axe Cop. He did like 3 finished graphic novels. He did 2 books at Slave Labor Graphics.
Yep, Chumble Spuzz.
Chumble Spuzz, which was nominated for an Eisner, which I had no idea. And he had 2 pitches that he was working on for the Cartoon Network before Axe Cop. That's the overnight success story of Axe Cop, the guy that did 500 pages of graphic novel. I couldn't believe it. I was like, it was weird because it sort of proved all the things that I've always felt, but I felt like he was the exception. I was positive, like, oh, you didn't do it like the rest of us, pay your dues. I was fucking wrong. That guy more than paid his dues. So when the thing happened, when it actually struck, he was able to completely capitalize on it and make the most of it. Networking is easier than you think. Most people don't appreciate where they're at. This is something that I've sort of found. Because this industry is very competitive and because you're always looking to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and you want to have bigger opportunities or bigger projects, I know myself, sometimes I get so caught up in the stress of that I don't realize this has been an amazing process, and I'm doing what I love, and I get to tell stories, and I need to appreciate what's happening right now is pretty cool. And even 3-4 years ago, when I first started really concentrating on my writing, that was cool too. Instead of always being like, I suck, and if only I was over there, things would be better, and that guy's got the opportunities I wish I had, the smartest thing that I did, and sort of I think one of the things that's helped me gain more confidence is also realizing where I'm at's really cool, and where I'm going to go hopefully will be really cool, and there'll be ups and downs, but I'm doing well with where I'm at right now.
I mean, there should be, this kind of touches on things we said before, but you should be able to find joy in just the art of sitting down in front of your keyboard, in front of your notebook, and creating things, writing words and shaping ideas. Because if there's no joy in that for you, it's going to suck to be a writer, because you have to spend almost all of your time as a writer doing that. So, yeah, I appreciate where you are. And I mean, you know, you should be able to find almost everything you need in just sitting down in front of the keyboard, I think. This is slightly overstating it, but most of what you need should be there. And everything else on top of that, if it starts to happen, when it starts to happen, that's just incredible gravy, like the best gravy ever. Super gravy.
And you need to be able to motivate yourself.
Yep.
You know, some people, they'll get this idea, they'll say, well, you know, if I had a deadline, I'd get it done. And I'm like, then you don't want to do it, you know? And I know that's hard to hear, but it's true. You've got to push past those doubts and do it because you want to do it, not because someone is telling you to do it. Big or small isn't necessarily better. So there are big companies in this industry, and there are big media, and there's all sorts of amazing stuff, and there's small publishers, and there's small outlets. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them treat people well, some of them communicate well, some of them don't. Every situation is different. A lot of people say, well, the biggest opportunity must be the best, or, you know, the smallest company is the least professional. And these things are not necessarily true. You need to sort of evaluate each one individually, you know, and find relationships that work for you in the industry as well. And one of the things I've found is that where I thought I wanted to be isn't necessarily where I've ended up, but I'm totally cool with that now. So
You can't force it. It's going to happen the way it's going to happen. I mean, you can figure out ways to sort of chart the path a little bit, but things are going to happen the way they're going to happen. So just you need to put yourself in a situation where you can take advantage of opportunities as best you can by, like, I don't know, the metaphor I use for sort of networking and developing contacts and stuff like that is that I used to be a hunter and now I'm more of a fisherman rather. And because it used to be that I would pick one person and say, that's the person. If I can have a relationship with them, if I can have a contact with them, then it'll open all the doors I want. But the people who are in that position as gatekeepers have very finely tuned instincts for like weird obsessive craziness coming their direction. And so when
you hid your insanity.
No, I didn't at all. I was hunting, and so I would approach these people, and it inevitably just didn't work, and I still don't feel like I have good relationships with some of those people. But then when I realized that really wasn't working, I switched to kind of a fishing approach, which is just you put a bunch of bait in the water, which is, for me was like good work, quick little, hey man, what's going on? Here's what I have going on. What's going on with you? Like little contacts that you can then, if more things are happening, they'll already have a good feeling about you, and you can capitalize on things. So it's fishing instead of hunting, I think, is a way to approach networking.
Sweet. So we have burned out our time because we talk too much. So we're not going to do Q&A, but
We're not?
all of us, we've got like less than 5 minutes. I could take like
1:15?
2. She
Where's
gave
the
me the
time?
5 because they got to.
Okay, so 4 minutes.
So, but all of us are available at our tables, and we're going to be there most of the day today. So if you come by and see us individually, Cullen's at L17, and he's got copies of the 6-gun, which is currently being developed as a pilot, I do believe, for NBC.
It is.
Sweet. And he can be found at CullenBunn.com. Cullen Bunn is his tweet. It's a pretty simple system you can see here for our websites and our Twitterani. So Charles Soule, CharlesSoule.com, Charles Soule on Twitter. And he's at I-15, and then next to him is some dork. So come see us, ask us questions. I know all of us have got on our blogs, we've got information, we talk about our work. On Charles' blog, he has a fantastic series of articles all about creator-owned contracts and how to work with an artist and build sort of the legalese that you need to make sure that when you're going into a project, everyone knows what the ownership stake is, and it's phenomenal. It's called Agree to Agree. I've got a series of tutorials all about script writing, story pacing, and the economics of creator-owned comics. So if you get a chance to visit the website, Cullen, have you got?
Yeah, I've got
sample scripts
pretty much. I've got sample scripts. I've got sample proposals. I've got pretty much a timeline of what I went on Twitter one day and broke down a timeline of how I broke into doing comics. So and then I put that on my website as a timeline of how the exact process I went through. And I'm going to be putting some more process stuff up there soon.
Sweet. So the more you guys do the research and put yourselves into it, the more you're going to get out of it. We hope you found the panel very useful. Please feel free to follow up with us and ask us questions one-on-one. Hang out with us. Browse our books.
Yeah.
This is the big thing. I know this sounds a little mercenary, but the reality as well is that if you want to do creator-owned comics, you also have to realize you should support creator-owned comics, okay? If you're not, I see this all the time. People come to me and they'll say, oh, I've got this idea for an original manga. And I go, have you ever bought a manga that came outside of Japan? And they go, no. And you go, well, why would anyone buy yours, right? Support great creator-owned comics. Support great creators.
Like the 3 in this very room.
Maybe. And you will, you're going to meet great people. You're going to become a part of that community. And you're also, when the time comes and you start putting out your work, you're a part of something instead of just expecting that people are going to come to you out of the blue. Make sense? So support your favorite creator-owned comics. Tell other people about them. Come visit us. Come hang out. Come ask us questions. And enjoy the rest of the show.
Thanks.
Thanks, folks.